All right, let's get right into it. We're about to unpack one of the most explosive stories ever told, the Book of Acts. Seriously, think of this as the action-packed sequel to the Gospels. It's the story of how a small, hunted group of followers in a forgotten corner of the Roman Empire somehow grew into a global movement. It really is the story of how a single spark became a wildfire. And this quote right here, this is the key to everything. Just before Jesus ascends into heaven, he leaves his followers with this one crucial promise. But it's so much more than a promise. It's a mission statement. It's basically the roadmap for the entire book. And pay attention to the geography here. It starts small in one city, Jerusalem, then it radiates outward to the surrounding regions, Judea and Samaria, and finally, to the ends of the earth. This is the blueprint for everything that's about to happen.
So let's go to that starting point, Jerusalem. Jesus is gone, and you've got about 120 of his followers, all huddled together in an upper room. They're doing what he told them to do. They're waiting, they're praying, they're probably pretty scared and confused, and they have absolutely no idea what is about to hit them.
And then it happens, the moment that just ignites the whole thing. It's the Jewish festival of Pentecost, so the city is jam-packed with people from all over the known world. And all of a sudden, the room where the disciples are meeting is filled with a sound, like a hurricane ripping through it. And then, something that looks like flames of fire comes to rest on each one of them. The book says they are filled with the Holy Spirit and just start speaking in languages they have never, ever learned before.
The impact of this moment is, well, it's just staggering. The noise draws a huge crowd, and people are completely bewildered because they're hearing their own native languages being spoken by these simple guys from Galilee. So the Apostle Peter, he stands up and gives the very first public sermon, explaining what in the world is going on. And the result? 3,000 people. 3,000 people join the movement in one day from one talk. The spark has officially been lit.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just some philosophy club they were starting. A completely new type of community forms, and it is radically countercultural. I mean, think about it. The Roman world was built on these rigid social classes and power structures. But this group, they shared everything. Their food, their homes, their money. People were literally selling their own property to make sure that nobody in the group went without. Rich, poor, men, women, all were treated as equals. This was a socially explosive way to live, and it was incredibly attractive to people. Well, as you can probably imagine, this fast-growing, radical movement starts to cause some serious friction with the religious authorities in Jerusalem, and that friction is about to ignite into full-blown, open opposition. And that brings us to a man named Stephen. He was this powerful, respected leader in the new community. But after giving this fiery speech where he accuses the religious leaders of rejecting God throughout their history, he's dragged outside the city, and as they're throwing stones at him, these are his last words. He's asking for forgiveness for his own killers. He becomes the very first martyr of the movement.
Stephen's death is the flashpoint. A great persecution, as the text calls it, just erupts against the believers in Jerusalem. And the man leading the charge, the one spearheading this violent crackdown and dragging men and women off to prison, is a zealous Pharisee named Saul. Okay, so here's the incredible paradox, the thing nobody saw coming. The whole plan was to stomp out this movement by terrorizing it in its home city. But what actually happened? Well, believers fled Jerusalem for their lives, scattering into the surrounding regions of Judea and Samaria. And everywhere they went, they took the message with them. The very act designed to destroy the movement was the thing that caused it to spread like wildfire. So the fire is spreading, but it's still mostly contained within the Jewish world. But now, the story's about to take two absolutely shocking turns that will change the destiny of this movement forever. First, you've got Saul, public enemy number one, on his way to Damascus to arrest even more believers. And out of nowhere, he's hit by a light from heaven so bright it knocks him flat on the ground, completely blind. A voice from heaven, the voice of Jesus, calls him out by name. And in that one earth-shattering moment, the movement's greatest enemy is transformed into its future greatest champion. At pretty much the same time, the Apostle Peter has this just bizarre vision. He sees this giant sheet being lowered from heaven, and it's filled with all the animals that Jewish law said were unclean and forbidden to eat. A voice tells him to eat, and when Peter protests, I've never eaten anything unclean, the voice says something that changes everything. What God has cleansed, you must not call unclean. And this vision, it wasn't really about food. It was about people.
Right after this vision, Peter gets called to the house of a Roman centurion, a non-Jew, a Gentile, and for the first time it clicks. God is tearing down the wall that separated Jews from the rest of the world. This message wasn't exclusive, it was for everyone. This idea was so revolutionary that they later had to have a big meeting, the Jerusalem Council, just to make it official and confirm that the mission was to the entire world. So, with their former enemy now their lead advocate, and the door thrown wide open to the entire world, the stage is set for the final, explosive phase of expansion. Saul, who now goes by his Roman name, Paul, sets off on a series of absolutely grueling missionary journeys, pushing the message to the very edges of the known world.
And let me tell you, his travels are anything but a smooth ride. In a city called Philippi, he and his friend Silas are arrested, they're publicly beaten, and they're thrown into the maximum security part of a prison. But at midnight, as they're praying and singing hymns, a violent earthquake rocks the prison, their chains fall off, and all the doors fly open. Just incredible.
Then in Athens, which was basically the intellectual capital of the world, he's not facing prison guards, he's facing philosophers. He's brought to a famous spot called the Areopagus, and he actually gets into a debate with the city's greatest thinkers, cleverly using their own altar to an unknown god as his starting point to talk about Jesus. And then you have Ephesus. His work there is so successful that it starts to wreck the local economy. See, the silversmiths who made their living selling silver shrines to the goddess Artemis, their profits start to plummet. So what do? They whip the entire city into a massive riot, packing into a theater and chanting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," for 2 solid hours. Total chaos. So after years of these epic journeys, surviving shipwrecks, beatings, riots, implanting new communities all over the map, Paul feels this undeniable pull from God's Spirit to go back to where it all began, Jerusalem. The story is coming full circle. But this isn't a happy homecoming. This question is filled with tension and dread, because as he gets closer and closer to the city, the warnings against him going back just get louder and more specific. Pretty much everyone he meets is telling him, don't go. And we're not just talking about bad feelings here. In the city of Tyre, other believers explicitly warn him through the Spirit to stay away. Later, a prophet named Agabus does this piece of public theater. He takes Paul's own belt, ties up his own hands and feet with it, and says, this is what's going to happen to the guy who owns this belt in Jerusalem. By this point, everyone, his friends and traveling companions, they're all weeping, literally begging him not to go. But in the face of all of this, Paul's resolve is just unshakable. He tells his heartbroken friends that he's ready not just to be thrown in prison, but to die in Jerusalem, if that's what it takes to finish the mission Jesus gave him on that Damascus road. And the prophecies, of course, they come true. He gets to Jerusalem, he goes to the temple, and he's immediately recognized. He's falsely accused of defiling the holy place. A mob grabs him and they start beating him to death right then and there. He's only saved at the last second when Roman soldiers rush in and arrest him, which kicks off years of trials before governors, kings, and eventually Caesar himself. And that's where the book of Acts just ends. Paul is a prisoner of Rome on his way to make his case to the emperor. That wildfire that started in a tiny upper room in Jerusalem has finally reached the very heart of the empire. And it leaves us with this ultimate cliffhanger. What happens now? What happens when this unstoppable message, carried by a man who absolutely will not quit, finally collides with the most powerful, immovable empire the world has ever known?